A Build Hatch developed production.
On this week's episode of Build Hatch, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Matt Fair from Crete Kings Without Crowns. Matt is a specialist in polishing concrete. What you probably won't notice is we ended up doing this week's show in 2 sittings, as once we started talking, we just couldn't stop. It was such a good old-fashioned, honest conversation coming straight from the heart. Like a lot of tradies, Matt values his family and he talks about coming from humble beginnings, and we look back on the early days starting out where you simply have nothing but hopes and dreams. This week's episode was truly inspiring, so please enjoy. Today on Build Hatch, I'm joined by Matt Fair. Matt's the owner of Crete Kings Without Crowns. So Matt, welcome to Build Hatch.
Thanks, Aaron.
All right, so Crete Kings Without Crowns, that's quite an interesting name. Where does that name come from?
Came originally from a thought, but 2 songs gave it the actual title. There's a song from Illy where he says in one of his lines, "This is for all my kings that never wore crowns." And then there was another Jewish hip hop guy called Yahoo, and he had a song called "A King Without a Crown." And I think it ties into, from my way of thinking, concrete has this really almost industrious type, not a very glamorous type of name to it, if that makes sense. So if you put a polished concrete floor down, people are always amazed that that's actually concrete, and how can you do that? So when you oppose that with, say, a beautiful marble floor or a granite floor, something like that, people will pay a really high price for something like that, but then they'll balk at the price for concrete. So a king without a crown is still royalty. So if you can get something to be as beautiful as any of those other things, but it's still just concrete, then for me, that's the king without a crown. You're not having to pay those ridiculously high prices, but you're getting such a prestigious product. So that's my way of thinking.
Oh, well, you've obviously put a lot of thought into the name, so yeah, that's a great story. So we're here in Newcastle at your showroom, and yeah, quite impressive.
Thank you.
Great idea.
Yeah.
So I gather the concept was thought about. You're obviously a concrete polisher and wanted to get to a stage where you had a bit of a showroom. It's a meeting room. I'm looking around. There's some amazing different types of polished concrete finishes. So yeah, clients must love to be able to come here and meet with you.
Yeah, thanks for coming. This is our second showroom. We used to have one over in Islington. Unfortunately, the building that we were in was sold, so we had to move out. This one has been nearly 2 years in the making. So we first got in here and polished the floors and were fairly sort of gung-ho with it. And then we just got avalanched with work and just got put to the back burner. And then about halfway through last year, I decided that we need to get it open, because it just gives us for starters, it gives Veronica a place to work from, and it's just a place to have people as a launching point. So we'll have clients come here and meet us, and they can look through things. As we were saying before, there's different finishes and different ways of doing the concrete, and then when we do that, they can look at it, they're amazed, and then Veronica will take them around to look at other previous clients of ours that we've worked in, because then they get an idea of what the actual floor looks like in a finished home, because it's really important to see concrete as a secondary thing. If you come in here and just see a big open area and it's all concrete, it's really hard to imagine what that's going to look like with your house. If you go into somebody's house and you see it furnished, and you can see the way that they live with that floor, it can break or make that sale for the actual whether they want to go ahead with it. So I really like to be with polished concrete, warts and all. If I see a client hesitant over something, if they're worried about cracks in the floor, if concrete's going to crack, it's just what it does. If you're worried about inconsistencies and things like that, I would prefer them to go ahead and get carpet or tile, something that they've got a controlled outcome in, because they're not always going to get that with concrete. And I'd rather them voice that opinion right at the start than halfway through the job or when the job's finished and then nobody's happy. So, yeah, it's a good starting point, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking around, for those that are listening to this, we have polished floors, there's polished walls, different types of products that you obviously provide. We've got a polished benchtop table, which looks amazing. There's furniture. So I fully get what you're trying to achieve there, to be able to show to people that come to this facility and see exactly how their floor is going to be interacting with the rest of the house and objects such as furniture.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, showing people the finishes in the concrete that can be done, like staining the concrete and having it in different sorts of shapes, just by having different modalities in the way that we finish it and use the concrete. That a lot of the times people come in and say, "Well, how do you do that with concrete?" And it's probably the most adaptable building material there is. The way that you can move it and bend it while it's still in that plasticized state, and then it hardens up to be as hard as it is. It's just a phenomenal product.
Now, you mentioned Veronica, your lovely wife, which we'll hear more about shortly. So whereabouts, before you got into concrete polishing, where did you grow up?
I was born in Newcastle and then moved away when I was quite young. The family, my stepfather was a electrician, so we moved up through a lot of country towns, through mining towns and things like that. So we even lived in this tiny little outback town in Queensland called Thargomindah. We packed up in an old F-150 ambulance, moved up to this tiny little town, and my stepdad and his mate were running the mechanic shop up there. But it was too small to support two families, so he ended up coming back to the Hunter Valley into the mines there, and then I grew up, lived in Greta for a while. So I moved back to Newcastle when I was 12, I think. And so really, I consider myself a country boy, even though Newcastle's a big country town. But living out through all there, I think they're the kind of years, formative years. We were literally, as soon as you got up in the morning, the thing was you weren't allowed to knock on someone's door till 9 o'clock. That was the polite time. But if anyone was roaming the streets before then, you'd all meet up, and then you would go out bush all day. We would go out collecting birds' eggs, and chasing snakes, and if anyone knows Greta, the history of Greta is the migrant camp up there. We used to have a Polish migrant camp. So there's still a lot of Polish people of Polish descent who live up there. A couple of my friends, two of my mates, Daniel Kowalski and Tommy Slomka, they're very, very tied back to that area. And we would go out to the old army range and the old, what they called Silver City, which was the old tent city type thing. And just walk around through all the bush and find old bullets and things like that, and chase snakes, catch birds.
So classic Aussie childhood, basically.
It was honestly I wouldn't change anything that growing up of what happened to me in my childhood. It was just, it was rough and tough, but it was the best way.
So you grew up in a nice country, classic Aussie environment. What did you do after school?
I just floated. I had a lot of different jobs. There was one stage there I had 3 jobs, at once. No, 4. I was working for 2 different builders as labourers, one of them through the week, one through the weekend. I worked at a restaurant at night, and I ended up working at where it used to be called Grace Brothers, on the loading docks out the back. And I worked on the floor a little bit, but out the back, and I'd take all clothes around to things like that, do some deliveries. And then just so happened my brother-in-law owned an employment company, and he rang up one day saying, do you want to do some work for this builder? He needs a labourer, a concrete labourer. I said, yeah, because I was wanting to get out of what I was doing there. I always liked working outside, doing that kind of thing. So he rang up, told me to be up in the first job that I ever went to for him was up in Hawke's Nest, and I think the job had to be there by 7, and I didn't know how long it would take me to get there, so I left pretty early in the morning. I got there by 6 o'clock, so I just parked out in front of this guy's house and was just sitting in the car. I think I must have fallen asleep. The bloke just tapped on the window, said, what are you doing here? And I said, I'm just waiting for my boss to turn up to do your thing at the floor out the back. And he goes, oh, okay, and he was asking me all these questions, and I had no idea what polished concrete was, so I couldn't tell him anything. And then, yeah, the boss showed up and went through it, and ever since I've been doing this work.
And you loved it?
Yeah, well, it was, I couldn't believe when I first started doing it, like I said, it was the process of it. I'd never heard of polished concrete. Back then didn't know the difference between cement and concrete. So, it's just learning those kinds of things, and just as he was first grinding it, you just see the beauty of the stone and everything starts to come through. And because the machines were so small back then, a small single head machine, so you just work on this small area, and then you almost go into, we still use the same machine now for some jobs. You almost get into this flow state where before you know it, you've done 30 or 40 square metres. You just wonder where that time's gone. Because again, go back into your own head. I'm very comfortable in my own head because of the work that I've done in the last 20 years. Dude, you've got no one to talk to a lot of the times. The machines are loud, you've got headphones on, so you become quite comfortable. And you do go into that sort of flow. And before you know it, you've done this big, large area. And that's what it was like. I'd sort of seen, all I was doing for him was just basically hosing the floor down, moving the water so he could see it all. And then before you know it, look back, you've done this whole back area of the floor, and while it was wet, it just looked amazing. And he was one of the first guys up in Hawke's to ever get polished concrete. He was originally from Sydney, but he built his house up there. He had it in Sydney. So he decided to have it up. So they just had one of those old A-frame houses, put an extension on the back, and it was all polished concrete through there. And that's how long ago it was that when we did it, we just cut the floor. It was just a single cut over the floor. And then he paid a painter to come in and roll an epoxy coating over the top of it.
So I guess with concrete polishing, there are two methods. There's the existing slab. So that particular job that you're working on, was that an existing slab, or that was the new slab as part of the extension?
Yeah, that was a new slab. So that one had been poured specifically for polished concrete. But yeah, you get a lot of, you still get quite a few jobs. Just one we finished last week where it was an existing downstairs slab, quite a small area, and the client just wanted something that was functional. So they ripped up the linoleum and the carpet, and they had pets, so they wanted something that was quite robust but still looked nice. And they already had the concrete there. So I guess that's sort of in a way why people do push polished concrete as an environmentally friendly product, because you're using a product that's already there instead of adding something over the top of that which may last 5 to 10 years and having to be taken out, become landfill, build all again. Whereas the concrete that's there, you're using a product that's there, it's going to be there forever. It's going to outlast the house. So yeah, that's why I think a lot of the times you'll see where they do push that environmentally friendly with polished concrete.
Definitely. All right, so you began working for somebody else at the time. How did you start out working for yourself?
I got pushed into it. By that stage, I was on to my first boss. his work had quietened down, so he loaned me out to another guy. And the way that this other guy did polish concrete was completely different to the way that I'd been doing it. Completely different machinery, completely different finish and everything like that. And it was a real eye-opener. And I stayed working for that guy for another 3-4 years. And one day he just told me that he'd had enough. He wasn't enjoying it anymore, and he'd gotten an offer to go and work in the mines. And he said to me, he'd lined up with my old boss because they were friends, that if I wanted to, I could go back to work for him, and what he would prefer me to do would be work for myself. He said, I'm willing to, this amount of equipment here, you can buy this off me, pay me back. I don't want the money straight away, but just pay me back over time in an instalment type thing. And he said, that's what I'd like you to do. And where I was also lucky was, I hesitatingly use the word lucky, but I'd built up a really good rapport with all the builders that I ever worked for, because it was always, again, going back to the two I worked for my first boss, within 3 weeks I was out doing work on my own, because he had a building company to run as well, so he would just leave me on site to do it all. And then when I worked for my second boss, same thing. It was always me on site. I was always dealing with the builders and everything like that. So they all knew me. So when it came time for me to start off, Jason, who was my boss, said he had 4 or 5 jobs lined up that he was supposed to do. You know, if you want, you take over and you go and see these guys, let them know and see if they're happy for you to do it. So I did that. I went and saw all these builders, and every single one of them said to me that they had no problem with me doing it because they'd already known that. I said to them, all the equipment's the same, everything's the same. And they said, yeah, that's fine. The only difference would be that who they make the check out to. And every single one of them was happy I didn't lose any of those jobs. And then it just rolled on from there. So just getting out and seeing architects and letting all the builders know who had done for them, not that I'd done for them, who I'd been on their work sites for before, know that I was doing it now as well. I also went and saw my first boss and let him know that I was going to go out on my own. And it just rolled on from there.
So you had that opportunity presented to you and you took advantage of it.
Yeah. And it was funny because when that came up, we had a daughter only maybe 9 months earlier, and we'd only just bought our home and we're just about to move into it. So yeah, we were trying to start the business, trying to move into this house, which we couldn't move into. We had to gut all the floor out of it and re-level it all, and it just everything come at once. And I remember the day that I turned up to tell Veronica, and we were at the house, and she just sort of burst out into tears, but then
the pressure.
Yeah, well, just the shock of it, I guess, and having all, very stable type thing to all of a sudden being, like I said, I didn't have to go out on my own. I could have quite easily gone back to work for my old boss. I don't know how that would have worked out, but I'm glad that we went down the path we did. Luckily, Veronica's friend who was there at the time, was quite comforting for Veronica, and worked out the way that it did.
Especially with a little one.
Yeah, it's. You ask anyone who's in business, it's that balance of the family and the business. It's hard to, when you're with your family, it's hard to not think of work, and when you're at work, it's hard not to think of the family.
And that's exactly right. These are the stories that you don't hear enough about. So, all right, I'm interested to know, what were your goals back then in those early days?
To get paid. It's as simple as that, to make sure that, I sort of had that drilled into me from my earlier boss, where he said, he used to say to me, if you don't do a good job on this, you don't get paid. And so that was always the motivation, especially when I went out to work for myself, because if I didn't do the right thing and get everything exactly how it needed to be, and the client wasn't happy with it, they didn't have to pay, but I still had all the bills coming. So that was the trickiest part, just making sure that. And I didn't have trailers or anything like that. It was just myself, so I'm trying to lug around machinery that's 150, 200 kilos, trying to get it in the back of an old Ford Courier. And so you just learn to do things. Back the truck up to the slab or something like that, and just let it dip down a little ditch, just low enough that the tray would come up level with the slab, or look around on site for some LVLs or just things like that. Or sometimes you just had to grit your teeth and lift something.
So back then, who inspired you?
As cliche as it sounds, it's Veronica and the kids, because I had to provide for them. There are times there where we were so broke and had no money coming in that we had to buy nappies with our petrol card. This was more this was still a couple of years into it. Like, my son was long then, and I just remember thinking to myself, if I can't use my petrol card to get these nappies, he's got no nappies. You can go to your parents or go to. Well, I was never in a position to go to my parents for money because they couldn't give me. I would never ask Veronica's parents. I hated asking anyone for anything, whether it's a pride thing or not. I just don't like to owe people. So it was just really tough and making sure that I could provide for Veronica and the kids, and that was the inspiration. I don't know whether you call it inspiration or fear.
You just did what you had to do, didn't you?
Yeah, and whether that would require working. There were jobs where we did 24. I did 24-hour shifts. I had to work at a restaurant, start at 9 o'clock that night, and work through till 6 o'clock in the morning, and then go in to straight from there to another job. We had a job where we had a guy come up from Melbourne to help us do this specialised flooring, and it just so happened that when he came up was the only time that he could come. It was the same time where this restaurant was booked in that we had to do, and I couldn't move either of them. So that whole week, I was from the Sunday, and I finished up Friday night. So I would finish in town about 5 o'clock, come home, have dinner, sleep for 3 hours, go into the restaurant, work there all night, and then go straight from there to the other one. And it was, again, just had to do what you had to do. I don't know how many rules and laws I broke, but you feel like you can break yourself. You know what I mean? I would never put anyone else through it, but I have no hesitation to put myself through that.
And I can see your eyes lighting up and getting a bit glassy there. And as a fellow parent as well, I know that feeling as well. And you just work hard to make it work.
Yeah.
And get the job done.
Yep.
And I think that's very inspiring. But looking back, I'm sure you'll agree, they were the years where all you had were hopes and dreams.
Oh yeah.
And they're inspiring days, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you wouldn't change them for anything. It's as cliche as it sounds, it builds the character.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you can push. If you can push through things like that, you can push through.
Definitely. So, how do you actually get the work? Like, explain to the people that are listening to this. So, you're a concrete polisher. Mm-hmm. You basically polish existing slabs or purpose-built new slabs.
Yep.
How does it all work, basically?
The sooner they get in contact with us, the better.
Does that happen often?
Yes and no. It depends on a lot of the client will get in contact with us, as in the homeowner or the architect. If it's the builder who's getting in contact with us, generally it's probably too late because they have either poured the slab or haven't allowed for certain things. The architect is great. They'll generally come for advice, whereas the homeowner will come more for guidance. So, but essentially we want to get in almost straight away. you need to make sure that the concrete mix is going to be right, and that's just all the admixtures and things like that are in the actual concrete, because not all concrete is good for polishing. We prefer to work with certain concrete plants because we know that they deliver a better product and they tend to understand it.
And this is exactly what people who don't understand concrete polishing, they're not aware of the actual process sometimes. So there's those early conversations with the batch plant. There's the architect. So you can achieve different looks through different stone sizes and mixes and tints in the concrete.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, it comes back to the client, but just the finish that they're trying to achieve and what their vision is for the actual house. Because it's funny, you can see certain personalities come through with what they choose in polished concrete. Generally, I find people who like a lot of structure in their life, like polished concrete where it's a fully exposed slab, so they grind the concrete right back to expose all the aggregate. They just like the uniformity and that kind of thing. Whereas people who generally tend to be a little bit more creative and aloof, like a burnish or a salt and pepper type finish, because there's a lot of variation through. They know that there's colour and texture differences throughout, and they like that and they're aware of that and they're happy to live with it. But people who straight down the line, no, we want it to be the same all the way through. They generally have a lot more straight lines throughout their personality as well, if that makes sense.
And what about trends? Like you would have seen in 20 years, you would have seen different trends come and go and change with time.
Yep. Well, yeah, there was a stage where we were doing a lot of polished concrete with acid staining, so putting acid colours into the floor. But then what happened, the same sort of thing with the eco-friendly style thing of not bringing acids in. The main manufacturers were in the US, and then they would stop manufacturing or importing it to Australia because of the acid on the floor. So what would happen to the acid and things like that after it had been used? So they've gone away from that. So there's those types of things, and also just television and things. Even the block, that has a big influence. If something that we do appears on the block, then our phone will ring hot for 3 or 4 days, and then we have to sometimes let people down and say, look what they've done, edited that. It doesn't happen in a day, and it can't be achieved the way that they do that. It's the magic of television. But definitely, you can have things come through. If even someone just talks about, that it's in a new restaurant, and that restaurant's the flavour of the month as well. Have you seen the floor in that? Someone will ring us up and say, can you achieve that finish on our floor in here? And again, most things can be achieved if they're talked about early enough in the build. And if they can't be, that's why we do a lot of other products as well. So if we can't give you exactly what you want in that direction, maybe let's go in this direction and achieve close to similar finish or something completely different that you might like just as much.
Now, can you remember your first project that you worked on?
Yeah. It was up at the West, up at Nelson Bay, and it was for building company Graph. And I remember it was just for an exterior ramp, concrete ramp, and it was just all honed concrete, so non-slip and everything like that. But I remember speaking to them, turning up and everything. And just because I hadn't anything to do with the business side of things before, I was always just turning up and I'd do my induction, go in and start. But they were asking not only to do the induction, but all the swims, all my insurances and things like that. And I was like, well, I didn't know any of that. I got car insurance, if that counts for anything, and I had to chase up all that kind of stuff. And I'd ring at that stage. Veronica was working still for her other job, so I'd have to ring her up and ask all this information. And during, her lunchtime or whatever, she would chase down this information for me and then get it back to me, and then I have to go home. And there was a lot of toing and froing, and I just wanted to grind and polish the concrete, because again, it was the same thing of every day that I'm not doing it means it's another day that I'm not going to get paid, and got to get money and account so I can put food on the table. So you just learn to adapt really fast. And I think the biggest thing, and for anyone, especially in the building industry, you just got to roll with it. They block you off there, then go around the back door or whatever it is. You've just got to keep moving with it.
Keep fighting.
Yeah, because if you give up, it's easy to give up. And I think if you do give up, you're going to kick yourself, because you think, if I'd have just waited another couple of days, or if I'd have just done this. Whereas if you don't give up and you just fight through, then when you do, like you were saying before about when you look back on those hard times, I wouldn't be here now without that. So, remembering back to that first job, and then even the nerves just driving up there to like, wow, this is actually my company doing this. It didn't sound real, I guess. Like, this is I'm doing this, not just for somebody else, but for myself, my company, and my family.
That's right. And that has a huge element of pride as a man in wanting to do that for your family.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I guess that's one of the things these days, and not to get sort of too political, but as a man, you don't provide for your family as much anymore. Both parents have to work to bring money into the house to be able to sustain everybody. So if you're not feeling that worth, because we don't go out and hunt anymore or do any of those kinds of things, we want to feel like we're adding value to this relationship, and to do that, making sure that we can provide, whether you go and spear something or whether you're going out and doing your job and putting food in your kids' mouths, whether it be through a roof over their head, through whatever work that you do.
Now, looking back, can you recall a particular time or moment or job that was going really bad and things were tough, and can you tell us how you overcame those pressures to get on with things and make it work?
Yeah, probably the worst job that's ever gone wrong was that one I was talking to you about earlier, where I was working that 24 hours. It was a new product, same thing, it was a product that had been on the block, it was a concrete overlay system, and the guy who was supposed to come up and help me lay it decided to go on a holiday that week, or had booked it. So he sent his son up, and his son, he helped to lay it, that was fine, but he didn't know anything about the actual polishing side of it. And I was relying on him to be able to do that. And the client had requested this product, and so we'd got in contact with them and organised it all. So the son went, he really didn't know anything about the polishing side of it, and it wasn't a normal concrete. It had a lot of plasticizers and polymers in it, so the traditional way that we would polish it wasn't working. And anyway, he basically threw his hands up. The son went home and left me to try and sort this out, and things just went south, and with the client as well.
Because you're relying on that surface to be able to work your craft, basically.
Yeah, that's right. We couldn't get a decent finish on it, so we could. What would happen was the diamond pads that we used to polish the floor would glaze over. So for about 5 or 10 metres, everything would be going okay. Then they would glaze over, and they would stop working. You'd have to do something to try and remove that glaze, but then you would start a new section, and it would look different to the old part. So there was no consistency in the floor, the actual finish. And the whole time, the client, they're going, what's going on with it all? We've paid all this money. And it just was an absolute nightmare. And then when I actually got the guy to come up and have a look at it, he was doing a job in Sydney, and he said, oh yeah, I'll come up this afternoon, I'll help you, we'll get it sorted. He came up for an hour, and most of that time while he was with me, he spent on the phone to his broker, and then he sort of just looked over the phone and said, you know what, I reckon you've got it, and left. and so just left me with it. And it was so bad that I ended up having to put a completely different our X-Bond system over the whole floor to get a finish on it. So we couldn't polish it. We had to put something else over it just to make it up to the client. And it still didn't finish, between us and the client, didn't finish on a good note. It still wasn't pleasant, that's for sure. But nobody got sued, that's the main thing.
All right, so for your business, what sort of qualities do you need to have with concrete polishing? I mean, it's such an artistic and it's the money shot basically for flooring.
Yeah. Patience and obviously an eye for detail, but patience and be willing to try something. That's where, again, about 20 odd years I've been doing this, I've used quite a few different machines, and I've figured out how to get different finishes with all through the polishing processes and techniques and things like that. So I guess that's where we are a little bit different too, is do all of these different finishes from a full exposure through to a burnish, so you don't see any of the aggregate through to all of the aggregate and everything in between. Just listening to your client and finding out exactly what it is they want and then going from there.
And I'd imagine the easiest way is providing photos or something that's from Instagram or on the block, like you said.
Yeah. That's a good jumping off point, and then it's because Veronica now is in the business with me, and the best thing about it, she takes the clients out and goes to going off these photos, basing it off those, takes them around to look at the different floors that we've done in that finish.
So the actual real source, the physical product.
Yeah, because
as opposed to just looking at something online.
Yeah, you look at things online and we even do it too. You're not going to put photos up of your mistakes. You know what I mean? Like everything that you do is 9 times out of 10. Especially if you look at any polished concrete photos online, nearly all of them are taken from someone who's nearly laying on the floor. They're from down flat, and everything looks shiny from that.
And the light's perfect.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Filters are perfect. Everything's perfect.
Exactly, that's right. So that's, again, why we take the clients around, and Veronica will point out every imperfection that we can. If there's cracks, if there's this and there's that, because it's easier to nip anything in the bud at that stage than it is to try and get all the way through at the end. And I've been guilty of not being in communication enough. That's probably 3 jobs that I've ever had trouble in, apart from that other one I was talking about, I've ever had trouble in the whole time I've been in business, lead back to communication. Just having the client come look, say, look, oh, this is that, there's a problem here. Because my way of thinking is I'll be able to fix it up. It'll be okay in the end. And my tolerance for concrete is a lot higher than other people because I deal with it every day. So my expectation is this and that. But it's also, I walk away at the end of the day where this person has to live with it. It's in their house. So they're going to be a lot more emotionally invested in it than I am. But in saying that, I still have a large investment in it because it's my name at the end of the day that's associated with that.
Totally. I think you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned about problem solving and working it out. I have a similar philosophy myself where I've never had a problem that I can't resolve. You know, there's always a way to get through it, whether it's speaking to somebody to get advice, or you might even be able to sort it out yourself, but it's about having a conversation, reaching out to someone, or it might be a particular resource. So, like you said, it's spot on with our theme of this podcast, which is a picture tells 1,000 words, but it doesn't tell the story. So what about learning and development? What sort of learning tactics do you and Veronica sort of implement, particularly with, I'd imagine there's lots of different products coming online, different techniques, different tools. What do you do to address that?
I guess a lot of it is emails and things like that. You'll always get emails about new products. The reps The reps will let you know mostly about new products. So anything new that comes out, they're going to push towards you. Every year they have over in Vegas in the US, they have the World of Concrete. So that's where they call it the World of Concrete, but it's a lot of construction type things as well. And so they have a lot of things there, and everyone tries to get over there for that. But just even YouTube, you're amazed what you can find on things like on that. But nothing actually beats you getting in there and making a mistake, because when you make a mistake, you've got to fix it. So technique-wise, I've done quite a few courses. Polishing, there's a company down in Victoria called Works Plus, and they're the guys who sort of kicked off polishing in the way that we do it now. Really, really smart family by the name of the Vanderveens, and I've done, like I said, I've done their course numerous times, and even to the point where I've just gone down there off my own bat, and they've been good enough to allow me to spend the day with them playing around out the back of their factory. Anything that I'm trying to nut out myself, then, because they're not just dealing with my problem, they're dealing with hundreds of, I don't know how many polishers there are out there, but let's say hundreds of people's problems. They're getting phone calls all day, and it's this and that. So their resource is not just them, but it's every other polisher throughout. So there's really nothing that they haven't come across. And like I say, for myself, I've been doing it for near on 20 years. There's nothing that I haven't seen as yet in problem-wise. Even you get an old slab down in Sydney and grinding and polishing, and you could see the outline of an old beer bottle on the floor, and that was really cool, because it was an old factory that we're doing, and the guy who was refurbishing it all just absolutely loved it. It was phenomenal, and the guys who did it, the whole slab was mixed and poured on site, but they had the wherewithal to know to put concrete inside the bottle so it didn't float to the surface too much. They just pushed it down and screed it over it. So it was, things like that.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I'm still waiting to do an old concrete slab that may have been, owned by the mafia at some stage, and we come across some bones, So I don't know whether that's going to happen, buried in the old concrete boots, So, but things like that. Even the strange thing is that you'll even get smells come out of concrete, especially if you grind an old floor that may have had some carpet glue or something down, and it just has a certain smell to it, and there's certain things that come through in the concrete that have certain, and then you'll be walking through somewhere years later and the smell will come back to you, like, it throws back to that job.
Brings back memories.
Yeah, and it does. It makes you visualise that job that you're at.
These are the stories that you don't hear about, and you'll hear Jasper coming onto the show, and Jasper talks about, he's a landscape architect and landscaper, and he talks about the smells of the backyard and the landscape. So he actually thinks about that extra step where it's not about just designing something or planting something, but the smell or the light and all the little things.
Bring it all in together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you do have to do that. Like, even, that's what Veronica encourages people when they come in here to take their shoes off. So when they walk on the concrete, they get to feel how soft it actually feels. And that's what people can't believe with the concrete. They say it feels warm and it feels soft. And again, getting back to that mentality of people, they first have concrete, it's just concrete. It's not marble. It's not terrazzo, or it's not a timber floor or something like that. It's a product all on its own, but it's just as beautiful as the other.
For sure, all the different properties and the connection that people have when they walk into that particular address.
Yeah, and just knowing that the concrete itself is going to outlast anything else. Concrete itself doesn't stop the chemical reaction for 100 years. So it's going to outlast all of your building, sure.
And outlive us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Well, don't know, maybe some of the way that these people are going with their reversing aid, things like that.
All right, Matt. So for our listeners out there who are listening to this, who prepare prices for jobs and actively seeking work, what sort of tips and tricks do you have for those guys that are dealing with clients and putting together prices for builders?
The best thing to do, I guess, is try and find out exactly what the client wants, because a lot of the times they're just putting down on the actual, for us to put into a quote, polished concrete. And as I've said before, there's a lot of different aspects to what polished concrete is. So if you put a price in for a certain finish, and that comes back at a completely different price to what they're thinking. So, for example, if you do a full exposure of concrete where you expose all the aggregate in it, it's a very different process to a surface polish where you're not seeing any of the aggregate. And if you go in at the price of a surface polish and it's a full exposure, then you're really going to do yourself a real harm, as in the bottom line of the dollars. So you either have to then go back to the builder and say, look, that's not what I quoted, and they need to come up with that extra money, or they do it for that price and they're going to have to cut costs somewhere, and generally that's time and everything. So they're not going to get the exact finish that the client's after. It's not going to be a good outcome for everybody, because they may not get paid. The builder puts all his work behind because it just causes such trouble, because when you're doing a floor, obviously that's it. No one else can really get on site a lot of the times, because you're taking up so much space of the build. If there's other things going on that they can do externally or something, but generally internally you have the run of the floor for the whole time that you're in there, because if someone walks across your floor while you're trying to do it and they do something to ruin it, stain it or something, then again it goes back to costs involved and such. So you want to make sure that you're just quoting and pricing exactly, finding out exactly what it is that the client's after. That again, it comes back to just that communication, I guess. That's a really good way to do it.
I think particularly with your profession that it is a little bit difficult to compare apples with apples. So I think you're really correct where you said about adding value and having that interaction with the client to explain to them what they can expect from your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And not even just obviously from our work, but just polished concrete in general. Comparing it against something like linoleum or tiles and such, and the longevity that a polished concrete floor can give you, as opposed to putting something over it, carpet or lino, which is maybe 5 to 10 years, depending on the wear and tear of it. Tiles, you're just adding something to a product that you already have down, so why not use the surface you already have to get the good finish? And again, speaking with your client, finding out exactly what it is that they want, you're always going to get a better result when there's communication there.
So I guess that's exactly how you demonstrate that you can add value with the project, that you can immediately communicate your difference in finish and quality, so that it isn't just about comparing apples with apples. It's you're having that early interaction with the client to develop that relationship really early on.
Yeah, it is, because it's not a cheap product. Like, people have this idea that it's just concrete. How could it be as expensive as that? And it's not the concrete that's the cheap part. It's the machinery that we use. It's all of the products that we have to use. All of our polishing and grinding discs are all diamond encrusted, so they have diamonds inside them. So we have to polish with those. So there's a lot of money that's spent going into the floor, plus just the man hour that's involved in it. It's so labour intensive, and we're pushing around machines that are 400 or 500 kilos every day that don't want to do what we want them to do. So it can be really taxing on your body. So that's why it can be as expensive as it is. And when I say expensive, it depends again on what you're comparing it to. If you're going to get a $10 tile from Bunnings, obviously it's a lot more expensive than that. Or you could get a Calcutta marble tile, which is going to cost you $500 a square metre. It just depends on what it is. And then So we are going up against those kinds of things, and then we're going up against other polishers, guys who are doing things. They may do it in a different way, not exactly doing the same as you. They may do it in a cheaper sort of way that may add value in a certain way, but over the long term, not so much. So that's where that communication, and Veronica and I are trying to get across to the client that what we're providing is not just the service of your floor, but involving them in decisions by taking them into previous clients' houses or other works that we've done. So they get a real scope of what the floor is going to look like by seeing it furnished in other houses, instead of just presenting them with a tile-sized piece of polished concrete and saying, this is going to be your house, this is going to be the floor. They can go in and see what it will look like furnished. They can talk to the homeowners who we've done the work for, and we always encourage the homeowners to be really honest with the client, because again, if it doesn't work out, that if someone's expectation of polished concrete doesn't meet the real life situation of it, then again it comes back on us. So it's all. I think it's just always better to be very, very honest up front with them.
For sure. We were discussing earlier about the young Matt and Veronica with the little one, 9 months old, getting the work. I mean, the machinery that you use in concrete polishing is not cheap, is it?
No, not at all. No. I think if you're really going to set yourself up in a decent way to do it, and by the time you've bought decent machinery, that includes your grinder and your large dust extractor, and then smaller machine, and you need to get it around, so either through a van or a trailer, and then a truck to pull your trailer or something decent, you're looking all up around $100,000 to do it decently. I mean, you can get cheaper machines, you get cheaper vehicles and everything and such, but again, it will come down to, I guess it does fit into where you want to sit in the market as well. If you want to sit more at that lower end, you can get the cheaper machines, and you're going to get a result where it'll tie in with everything like that. But for us, we try to target the higher end of the market, so we need to produce really good floors that are aesthetically pleasing but are going to last a long time. So we need to, all of our consumables and our machinery needs to be the best that we can source, and so that costs quite a bit of money. And to do that, like I say, you're setting up. I didn't set myself up initially, like I said, with all that kind of stuff. It was just, I was lucky enough to pay my old boss. He gave me the gear. I paid him off over a certain amount of time. It was just lugging it around in the back of an old Ford Courier until I could get to the point where I could get a decent trailer and get the bigger machines and all that sort of thing. So, yeah, I was able to grow into that.
So that comes back to learning to crawl before you walk, and then walk before you run.
Oh, absolutely.
And growing, and it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly, yeah. And that's the good thing too, that to be able to get yourself into that position where you do have all the machinery, and you look and you think to yourself, I don't have any debt for any of it. Like, everything that we own is paid for outright. I know that some people would say, well, you're better off to lease it because it's a tax type thing and everything like that. But I'm one of those people that hates to have debt over their head. So I would rather own something and pay for things as I go than know that at the end of the month I've got a $15,000 bill coming in. So I just, that's the way that I've sort of always worked it, and the way I'll always try and do it as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a smart way to go, and particularly, I mean, we've spoken on previous episodes about, you'll see builders or some subbies who have the top-notch ute, and I mean, now we're starting to see tradies going around in those big Dodge Rams.
Oh yeah,
and you'll just deep down that they're maybe not doing quite as well as what they're perceived to be, but if you're smart and invest in good tools, and have that great relationship with the client where you can send new clients there, that puts you so many steps ahead than the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like both of our vehicles, car that I drive around is a 30-year-old Land Rover, you know, and people hear me coming before they see me. But they also recognise the vehicle, you know. I guess it's now sort of become a little bit synonymous with the business itself. So I couldn't imagine, putting myself in a large amount of debt. I almost did it once to buy a brand new ute type thing, and fortunately, it could talk me out of it, you know, because I'd probably still be paying it off. And it's, you know, if you ask anyone who tells you that it's probably not worth buying any car brand new because, you know, the value that they lose so quickly, and especially for us, we just trash cars because we're climbing in and out of them every day covered in concrete. So whereas the truck that I've got now is perfect. If worst comes to worst, I can just hose it out in the cockpit and in the back of the tray. So
I think people will be intrigued listening to this, wondering what it is. So I definitely want to be able to put that up on an Instagram page. So speaking of money, now what's it like at the end of the job when you do finish one on time and the client's satisfied, and what's that like?
It's really good. I think that the look that you see on the client's face is the best part of it. It's almost, in the past I've almost thought of it, probably the best way to describe it would be to call it concrete alchemy. Because like with alchemy, where they would turn lead to gold. So if you look at concrete, they come in and look at it, it's an old dusty slab, and then they come back a week later and it's this beautiful shiny floor that has all of these characteristics and everything throughout. So sometimes it can be good to have them there throughout the process, but I always like to see that if they don't come, that they get to come in right at the end, and they're blown away by it. They always have to touch it. They're always, I guess, like I said, aesthetically it looks great, but they'll always get down and touch it with their hands and take their shoes off and walk around with it. And just the excitement of it. And they'll discover things in the floor that you didn't see. So they'll point something and say, "Oh, look at that there," and you know, you've been looking at the floor for the last week and didn't notice that. So that's what everyone comes in, and everyone brings their own unique perspective to it. So it's really, really nice to see the excitement side of things, I guess, and the appreciation.
You like the wow factor?
Yeah, I to be honest with you, I'd rather not be there when they turn up. I'm not very good with praise sort of thing, so when they start telling you things like that, I'd rather. I had a situation once where the client didn't even know that I was the owner of the business, so they dealt with Veronica pretty much throughout the whole thing. So I just turned up, polished the floor, and they were there at the end, and you know, they did say something about, Veronica's husband Matt will be here at some stage to come and have a look at it, I guess. And I just sort of nodded and smiled and kept packing the gear away. And they thought you were a worker. Yeah, they thought I was just one of the guys who did the actual work, and I'm happy with that because
I like that too. That's really good.
Yeah, and then they can sort of, in a way, be a little bit more honest because they don't feel like they have to inflate your tyres or anything. That way you can talk to them, and then I guess she did find out at some stage that it was actually me, but I had packed up and left before Veronica got there. So, but I enjoyed that. It does, like I say, it doesn't happen very often, but that was a really good situation.
Just on that, what's the most interesting thing that you've been asked by a client or architect to incorporate into the concrete? So, like the ideal job where you've been engaged early on or consulted with this is the finish that the client's after. Is there something really interesting that someone's asked you or the builders put into the concrete so that knowing that you're going to be polishing it? Yeah,
there was a lot of times there where they started to do a lot of stains in the floor. So that was really nice to do, very creative, and people would say they want to do logos and such like this. But this was not when I was working for myself, but for one of my old bosses, we did an old schoolhouse up in the Hunter Valley that people had bought, and they were turning it into a bed and breakfast. And in this in the old schoolhouse, we got to put designs in the floor of what kids basically would have drawn type things. So we got to do all of the, just things like hopscotch, drawing stick figure type people into the floor, and then putting all of these stains throughout. That was really interesting. And then when you have clients who'll come in and say, oh, I want to put, there's a client that we haven't done the job yet, but this is a funny story where the lady's father used to be an opal miner, and so when they poured the floor, they wanted to seed it with all of these opals throughout the floor. And anyway, they had 2 bags of opals. One were really expensive good opals, and the other ones were just not worth much at all. And unfortunately, the really expensive ones got thrown in by accident because someone hadn't told them. So eventually, at some stage, that floor will get ground back, and you'll see those opals. And she always says that she's gonna, as soon as that's done, she's gonna make the husband sit there and dig them all out so they can. It's almost like a nest egg for them, I guess. So doing things like that. And anytime I guess one thing that you like to hear from an architect is when they say, look, we don't know if this can be done, but we'd like to try X and this or so on. So those kinds of things I really like, and because I've been doing it for so long now, I mean, don't get me wrong, I still like to do the floors and things, but it's those different ones that you like to do, especially nowadays where a lot of people are doing off-form concrete walls and things like that. So you're getting the floors and the walls to marry up. I've seen where they've had concrete benches come up out of the floor, so it all looks like it's a big wave coming out through the actual floor into their concrete bench. So seeing things in that way, people are becoming a lot more open to design. I think it's not, when I first started out, every time that we would start doing grinding of a concrete floor, someone would say, oh, you're grinding that so they can lay tiles or something like that. Now, no, they're doing polished concrete. Why would you polish concrete? It's cold and it's horrible, Whereas now, it's no longer just tiles, timber and carpet. There's other options there with it. And if you can have a concrete floor that comes up out of the floor and becomes your concrete bench top, it's pretty special.
All right, so I have a feeling you don't need much to get up in the morning, but what I'm interested to know, what actually gets you up every morning?
I like to get up really early. I get up about 4:30, and I'll go. That's where I'll go and I'll go to the gym that time of the day because it doesn't impact on my family time because the kids and Veronica are still asleep at that time, so I can get there between 5 and 6 o'clock, and then be back, and they're generally still asleep. So that means I don't have to come back in the afternoon and say, okay, I'm going again, and just taking time away. But to get up at that time of the day and do those kinds of things. I've always been an early riser, but I guess I like to do the work that I do. Don't get me wrong, there's been times where I've thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I'll just, put all the equipment on eBay and
go work for someone else and get a paycheck every month.
Yeah, or just get out of the whole business itself. Because like I say, doing it for 20 odd years or close to that, it can get a bit monotonous. Biggest thing for me is that I still don't feel like I've ever produced the perfect floor. And so that really eats at me. It's almost it almost becomes personal, where you're trying to perfect this thing, and it'll never come. But in your mind, you think this is the one. I'm going to get this one, and I'll walk away from this so happy. There'll be nothing that I'll pick apart, and it doesn't come. But in your own stubborn mentality, you think to yourself, I'll do it. And that's one of the things that gets me. Other things, just again, like you said before, about meeting clients' expectations and meeting with the architects and having new things to be done. So if someone rings up and says, we're going to do this, then you'll bounce out of bed that morning to go to that meeting to find out where it's going to lead. That's exciting. And finding out new products in the market as well. If something's going to give you a better result than what your last result was, it's always that. You're always looking to move forward. Even here at our showroom, I really, at some stage, I'm hoping to do more of our what's called glass fibre concrete, which is the furniture and the bench tops and things like that. I want to start setting up some concrete furniture outside with the view to eventually putting a coffee cart out there so that people can come past, have a coffee, they can sit on the benches or a day bed or something like that and think, oh, well, this is really nice. They can, you can buy that one that you're sitting on, or we can make one for you. I really like the furniture side of things. We've made a few bench tops for people's houses, and they're really good. And there's some guys out there who do some really, really great work. But I like to make furniture and things of my own, free thinking. So whenever I get to do anything of my own, I really enjoy that. So yeah, it's things like that. Always just thinking of new things to try and to do. That's what gets you up in the morning.
And do you have any routines that you practice every day or at night?
I try to. I'm always, for myself, I'm always in a better mindset and a frame of mind when I have a routine. Again, like I said, going to the gym, that's the biggest. I've always been an active person my whole life, from a young kid playing footy all the way through to now. And if I'm going to the gym and doing those things, I'm in a really good headspace, and that's where the routine comes into it, and that starts the day. So I can go to the gym, come home, have breakfast, then start off at a job. If I've got to kick off one or two jobs, then I go to those, and then get to the next one and start that, and then come home. And I like to cook, so 9 times out of 10 I'll do the cooking at home, and so it starts there as well. So you start cooking, and that helps prepare for the next day as well, because that'll set up how I pack my lunch for the next day. So again, when I start the next day, the lunch is already there. So if I'm terrible if I don't take my lunch with me to work and just buying things. I could spend sometimes $30, $40 a day on food, coffee and things like that. Whereas if I pack my lunch, I can get everything I need for the week for under $100. It's just a cost type thing, but more so, that routine. I think if I could ever go back in time, I would have told a younger Matt to have joined the military just for routine. If I could have had that drilled into me, because I didn't get it growing up. There was no routine in our family whatsoever. It was chaos. And so that's the one thing that I like. If I get myself in a routine, then I get through the day a lot easier.
And I think you, by the sounds of it, you have that discipline mentality of being organised, being prepared, making sure that you have everything lined up.
I try to be. It doesn't work out that way. I'd still, again, like I said, the way we grew up was very fly by the seat of our pants. So you're always thinking about the things that you need to have, and I always carry writing pads and things like that with me, so I'll write things down, but I still forget things. But I definitely try and the last thing at night, the first thing in the morning is to look at the diary to make sure that you're not forgetting anything that next day.
Now, when you and Veronica aren't working on your business, what are you doing outside of work?
We love driving. If we get a day off, we'll go for a drive. And I remember as a kid doing the same thing. And we're all trapped in the car, so we have to talk. So it's really good. The kids will talk, and we'll talk to them, and Veronica and I will talk. And sometimes it's still talking about business and things like that. But we'll go for a drive up the coast or out the valley, and we love to get on to the Domain app and look at properties, because eventually we want to buy some land somewhere, just to have it as somewhere to go, and just build a little shed there somewhere, and we can just have somewhere to go and spend weekends. My son loves dirt bikes, so he go riding there, and I'd like to do some hunting and fishing on it and things like that. So we get out there, and Veronica can just go out there and relax and just get away from things, just to not have for a weekend, know that you don't have to read every single email or take phone calls and such. And then Sunday afternoon, you head back to reality. So, yeah, we like to do that. We love taking the kids to the beach. Veronica, we probably don't go out for dinner and things like that as much as we should. And that's probably me. I'm sort of more introverted person. Veronica's very extroverted. She's really, it's true they say that opposites attract. She can walk into a room full of people and by the end of the night she's spoken to every single person in that room. Whereas myself, I'll find a corner to sit and just wait. If someone talks to me, I'm more than happy to talk to them. But I find it very hard to go and just speak to somebody off the bat. Yeah, that's one thing I really admire with Veronica, that she puts herself out there to the point where if she introduces herself to someone by the end of that night, she almost feels like that's the best friends type thing. She really puts herself out there in that way, and it's something to admire.
I think with you being a very creative and artistic type, very proud of your profession and your trade, I think that comes with the territory too, doesn't it? Being slightly introverted and you're thinking about your work and the detail.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You get lost in a lot of that type of thing, and you do hear that a lot. You hear people and I've never ever considered myself artistic. It's probably only in the last few years where you continue to hear that and continue to hear that. But then when you look back on your life and you think, like when I was in school, always my best subject was creative writing and doing things like that. So I guess there's a lot of people in my family my sister is a phenomenal photographer. My older brother, who, if you ever heard this, would kill you, but he was really, really good with poetry and things like that. So, I guess my mum was very good at that kind of things as well. So it does come into there. And like you say, you hear that introverted side of things. So I just thought I was shy, and that was the way that it is. So you definitely, you can get lost in things, just thinking of things, and you stare off in the old space. And I see my son doing that, where he'll be playing with his cars on the ground, and then he'll look outside, and you just watch him, and he sits there, and he'll be there for 4 or 5 minutes, just staring outside. There's nothing that he's looking at, but you can just see that his mind's ticking over and he's thinking of things. And that's what my mum says, that I was always like that as well.
So what's it like looking back now, back to that when you were younger, just started out in the concrete polishing business? What's it like looking back on that now?
The biggest thing is thinking that you've made it this far. Like, I know that there were people who, not so much friends or family, but definitely people out there who thought that I'd be lucky if I made it 12 months. So to get to, and even just reading statistics about businesses, how early on they fail and things like that. And we definitely could have failed, but because we're so stubborn, we didn't. And we just kept pushing through. So it's one of those things where, looking back, you're proud of yourself, definitely, for getting to this stage. And if things were to all of a sudden just stop tomorrow, so well, at least you tried. Like, to go out on your own in your own business and do that. Think about how many people throughout the world have wanted to do that and have never tried. There's always been excuses to this and to do that, and they'll find excuses more than a reason to do it. So just to have jumped off and done it, like, that's a big thing to be proud of. But also just meeting people that I've met over this time. Doing this podcast wouldn't have been possible without having the business. Some of the people that we've met over that time, some really interesting people who become friends. And even as weird as it sounds, having employees, you start to think, you don't think of them that way, because we're such a small business. You make sure that you got enough money to pay those guys because they're relying on you. So in a way, essentially almost it comes down to they're under your roof now as well. So they need to pay their rent. They need to put food on their table. So you need to make sure that you've got the money to pay those guys and got the work coming in. So that's always going. So it's a real sense of pride, I guess, and building up a product that, and when I say product, I mean the company-wise, that you can be proud of and people recognise. So, if someone tells you, oh, yeah, it's a weird thing, but again, going back to the work truck, people see it around and they know that, and they say, oh, that's the Crete Kings Without Crowns. And then I was in a cafe one day and a lady came up and said, oh, can we just get a photo of your truck? Yeah, but that's no problem. She goes, yeah, I follow you on Instagram and we always see all the amazing things that you guys do. And that, again, that's Veronica. She takes care of all that. So she puts some really good content up there. And when you do that, you drive off and you're thinking to yourself, oh, that wouldn't have happened in any other situation. And it does. It makes you proud to have gotten to where we've gotten to. And it wouldn't have happened without everyone around us, family and friends and everyone who's worked with us and all the builders and architects and clients who have given us the opportunity to do that work. So we're always happy in that regard.
I think they're the moments that you need too when you are having those down days.
Oh yeah.
And you're going through a bit of a rough patch. They are definitely the moments that you need to keep you going.
Yeah, it's that. Yeah, well, any ray of sunshine in a storm. It's those kinds of things. You look back at that, and then when you go through those hard times, once you come out of that, and you sort of look back and you laugh about, well, not so much the situation, but you can't believe you got out of that, or that there's another one that's going to come. There's always something just around the corner. But yeah, when you get those little things like that. And the kids, your own kids, like when they hear that you've done something or you're going to be part of a project. In the university, when we were involved in that and we finished that, Veronica took the kids through the university and the kids, wow, our dad built this university. Like, no, we didn't do that.
Yeah, but it's so true.
Yeah, it is. So when your kids, I'm sure it's not always going to be like that, but at the moment, they're really excited about those kinds of things. So that's a big thing.
Their dad's inspiring them.
I think, that's the thing about having your own business is trying to get that work and family life balance. And there were times there where I'm sure Veronica must have thought that she was a single mum because of how much work that I was never there. So Veronica was doing everything with the kids. And so when you get weekends off, then they just become so valuable. But the thing that I think is that, well, if I wasn't doing this, that one of the good things about it is with Veronica being in the business is we're really tied into what we do, but also we're lucky enough that our showroom is 500 metres from the kids' school, so we can, Veronica can close the doors here and go up to the school and see presentations. She's been able to be really present in the kids' lives, and I think a lot of people don't get to do that because if they're working for someone, obviously that 9 to 5 type thing. I mean, both parents these days have to work to pay a mortgage, so the kids are going to school and then they go into after school care. And then they come home and their parents are so tired because they've been working their butts off all day that, they prepare a meal for the kids and then it's 8 o'clock at night and everyone's going to bed and you miss out on so much interaction between yourself and the kids. So I don't get to do it as much as Veronica does, but that's why I look at, by me sacrificing myself to do this, Veronica is so much into their lives that it's just great, I think.
Yeah, look, I was having this exact same conversation with a client of mine a few weeks ago, and he was saying, they were going through a dispute, and his wife sort of said, "Look, I've had enough. Not of him, but I've had enough of this construction business, and it's killing me. And I just think you should go work for somebody else." So we were having this honest conversation, and he was asking me, "What do I think?" And I actually said and talked about the things that you just mentioned, and that was, it's the things that you don't think about, they are the things that you miss. So working for somebody else, yes, we have flexible work arrangements these days and things like that, but being able to pick up the kids on a Friday afternoon early from work, or if it's raining, you do have a shot to go on canteen duty or tuck shop duty. So they're the little things that people don't think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're having those dark days.
Yep. Yeah. No, it is. Veronica does book swap for David every, I think it's Monday, Wednesday and Friday. So on those days she's up to school. The kids have a reading list that they have to work their way through. So Veronica goes up there and swaps the books out every day, because again, the showroom's 5 minutes from the school. She can go up there and do that, and my son loves that. He knows that she's there, and the kids walk from school down to the showroom, and they get to do things like that. Just our work shed is right next to the showroom, so if I'm working, we put things in there so that they can hang around. We try and get them, or even just trying to get them involved in the business. Like my kids have heard us talk, I guess, so much about things, and if they've been present at meetings and things, so we've met a client and they'll meet our kids, and the kids will say some things sometimes that you don't even realise that they know, and even the client will be like, "Oh wow, that's very impressive," and they'll stand there with a big smile on their face. There's a job that we did quite a few years ago where I couldn't get anyone to look after my daughter, so I just rang the client and said, "Look, my daughter with me, is it okay if we go and have..." She comes along to the meeting, and it was just for this penthouse up in Newcastle, top floor of this building, and she come along, and she sat at the bench, and while we spoke, and the man was really nice, gave her a glass of juice and everything and a biscuit, and she sat there. And anyway, after we left the job, she said, "Do you think that we got it?" And it was that the whole thing was, do you think that we got it?
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. And now when we did get that job, and when we drive past, every now and then she'll point at it and say, remember when we went to that place there? So it is, it's really, really good.
Yeah, they definitely know. I mean, you mentioned before about work-life balance. I remember when I was building, and you're trying forever to achieve that work-life balance, and it's tough. So I used to combine viewing like quality control and seeing the sites to check on things and the progress. I used to take my family for a drive and take them to the sites and have a look on weekends and things like that. And that was a really nice way. They thought it was great. They were seeing Dad, and we were sort of walking around the site having a look. And of course I was there for, quality control or checking on things and seeing what the progress is like. But yeah, I think the kids got to learn, they got a bit of an education from that, and being able to learn and see what goes on. So kids definitely, they are a filter. They just consume everything.
Oh, absolutely. And the fact that you're asking for their opinion in things, that means so much to them. Like, it's almost you hate to say validation type thing, but the kids, because they do look to you for validation. You're, as a parent, the biggest influence in their life. So when you can praise them for something they deserve, obviously, then just the glow that comes off them is phenomenal. And when they come through and they see they're spending time with you, like you say. I remember a builder saying to me once that he used to use his daughter as a filter, that they would bring her on site, and she would come through, and if she was impressed by something, he knew he'd done a good job.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, it was, and he said that's how he also knew impressive houses around Newcastle. Like, he'd drive around with his daughter, and she would be looking out the window, "Wow, that's nice, Dad, you should have done that one," and he'd be like, missed out on that one.
Now, Matt, speaking about opinions, is there somebody that you talk to when making big decisions in your business?
Mainly Veronica. Yeah, we're pretty honest with each other. If decision-wise in the business, like if we need to buy new equipment or moving to new premises in the size of the shed or something like that, we just talk through it with each other. I mean, obviously, it's some bigger financial things you'll speak with the accountant about, but realistically, there's not anything that if we haven't wanted to do it, if we've both agreed to it, we've gone ahead and done that. We do speak to other, again, sort of being lucky to have met a lot of people over time. You know, if there's something that we're thinking about doing business-wise, we'll speak to some friends and family. My brother-in-law used to own an employment company. Well, he still does, but it doesn't do what it used to do, employment company. So he's been in business for a long time. So I'll go to him and speak to certain things with him, especially anything to do with employees, because he was a labour hire company he had. So he knew the ins and outs of that situation there. I've spoken to my sister-in-law, Veronica's sister. They own a mortgage company down in Sydney. So herself and her boss are very knowledgeable in money sides of things as well. So I've spoken to them, but realistically, yeah, if it's a talk that I want to speak to something within the business, then I'll talk to Veronica about that. But if it's something to do with polished concrete, then yeah, there's a family in Melbourne, the Vanderveens. The main one that I speak to there is Josh, and he's been doing polished concrete for a lot longer than I have, and there's nothing that he hasn't come across. And he deals with concrete polishers every day. He would take, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 calls, who knows. So he's getting all of this questions and information coming in him all the time. So he's just a really, really good question. Any time I have any doubts about anything with polishing, then I'll bounce something off him. And even if it's not the answer that I'm looking for, it might push me in a direction to be able to find what I need to do. So I think that's really important, to always be open to that learning, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're very lucky to be able to work with your wife, and it's not something that can always be possible. And so I think if you can be as successful as you guys are and have those open and honest conversations and work together, I think that's truly remarkable.
Yeah, we're very lucky. We went and did a business course up in Byron Bay about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a good excuse to go to.
That's a great marketing tactic, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Marketing course or business course in Byron Bay.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things I guess you have to, doing your small business type thing like that is you've got to find some perks in it. There's so many things that it's hard to do. You've got to find some things in that way to do that. But we were up there and we were talking to a builder who was up there, and same thing. He had worked with his wife for a little while in the business, and they'd been married for 15 years, and then after 3 years of being together in the business, they were divorced. And I've heard a few things like that, but I've also heard it the other way, where someone has their own business and their wife is still continuing their employment somewhere else. It's very hard for them to understand just how consuming that business is. And so I've heard people say, well, you just spend all your time in the business, you don't spend any time with us. And I think realistically, you have to, if it's your own business, you have to go all in. And if that person, your partner, doesn't believe in you and that, then it's going to be tough to make that to work. So yeah, we are very lucky in that way, and both very stubborn people. So we don't give up on it. We've been together since high school. So Veronica was 15, 16, and I was 17, 18, and I'm 42 now. So that's how long we've been together. So it's one of those things that I find it very very relieving to have Veronica in the business, and I do enjoy it. I really like it. I mean, and again, sort of going down to, like you talk about those silver linings on dark days, where sometimes you just feel like every time something is going wrong, that you jump when your phone rings, you know, what is it now? And then to see that it's Veronica's, you know, name come up on that phone, it's almost like a sense of relief to, have someone who just understands exactly what you're going through. It's a really, really good thing.
And I get the feeling from talking to you, sitting down like this, I get a strong feeling that you're so engaged in what you do. I think if somebody came along and offered you greener pastures somewhere else in terms of work, I really don't think you would take it. I think you would stick at it.
Yeah.
Because you get so much satisfaction out of doing your particular craft.
I do. And also I think I would struggle to work for somebody else for the way, obviously they want to run their business the way they want to run it, and they would want me to do things their way, and I might not necessarily agree with that, and I think, you know, we obviously clash at some stage, and it's always, you always work hard when you're working, but it is harder to work for somebody else and put in the same effort and result if you're working for someone. If I know that I have to do a job and it has to be done and it has to be finished by 10 o'clock the next morning, then I'm more likely to stay back and work through and do all of that. Whereas if I'm working for somebody else or somebody you have working for you, they would probably tend to just push it off and say, well, that's their job, they need to deal with that. They're the ones that got themselves in this situation so that they can get themselves out. So, yeah, to have that employee mentality. And again, going back to the stubbornness, no, I would, because I don't feel like I'm done yet with this business. So I definitely couldn't give it up, that's for sure.
It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
Now, recently I saw one of your completed projects, which happened to be the new space, which is the new inner city campus for Newcastle University. And I was actually lucky enough to finish law school there, so I know that building quite well. Can you please tell us a bit about that project?
Yep. Today it's still, to date, would be still our biggest project that we've been involved with. It's square metres wise, it was really, really, really large, but just the logistics of the job, the amount of levels that we had to, we were essentially on every level of the university, as in every floor, and working in there with all of the other trades and everything like that. Again, like I mentioned earlier, when we're on a job, we're doing the floor, we really want the run of that whole thing. And
you nearly need the whole site to yourself, don't you?
Yeah, and especially when we're getting to the stage of sealing the floor off, no one could walk on that floor because if we put the sealer down over the floor, no one can walk on it. So we needed to make sure that, again, communication coming into it, letting the foreman know that this level would be off site.
To take it back, how did you actually get that job?
Well, I know that we were asked to tender on it, but I think part of it was the fact when they were first talking about putting this new campus in there, Veronica had written to someone, an email to somebody at the university.
So just reached out.
Just reached out.
Heard that the building was coming up, or heard that the project was coming online.
Yeah, exactly. And just mentioned to them, look, if there's any polished concrete in there, we'd love to be involved. And again, at that stage, she was still working for somebody else and it was only me on the tools. And we never really thought anything would come of it. And it was, I think that email may have even been gone out a year or two before it had come out to the public. But we were lucky to be involved in when they did all of at the Callaghan campus, when they did all of the new student housing out there. So we'd already, I guess, indirectly had a relationship with the university. So then we got a phone call and asked if we would like to tender on it. And so they sent everything out to us and we went through everything, put a price in. realistically not expecting to get the job, because generally those bigger ones will go to much larger contractors than us. And then one day we received a phone call from one of their people from Hanson and Yunkin who won the contract for the job, asking, we were pretty close on our pricing and pretty close to where it all needed to be, if we wanted to have a meeting. And so, of course, yes. And that was at our first showroom. So one of the big bosses from Hanson Yunkin, who was originally from Townsville and had flown down for this, he came to meet us, and two of basically the numbers guys for HY came in as well. And we just sat down and talked, and one of the things he asked was, how many people do you have working for you? And I said, look, at this stage it's just myself, and Veronica helps out doing all the book stuff. He said, well, how will you get a job this size done? I said, well, there's other people I can get who come in and I can subcontract to help me with it.
Now, sorry to interrupt, Matt, but
okay.
I'm looking at this project now, and I've got to tell you, this isn't a small job.
No, not at all.
So, I can only imagine you back then thinking, this one man band, looking at the size of this job. It's a credit to you thinking outside the box. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think I remember reading a thing I think it was Richard Branson said it. If someone asks you if you can do something, tell them yes and learn on the job. Just to get your foot in the door, I guess.
That bite off more than you can chew, and chew like crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what it was. So we ended up going from just myself to then having Veronica on, and then.
So what did he say when you said that?
When he said that, and I told him that I'd just have to hire other guys, and one of the things that was really reassuring from him was where he said, just know that if you put an invoice in with us, and again, going back to being a small business, cash flow is so important. He said, know that invoice will be paid at the end of the month, and in any sort of special dispensation where the money needs to be released earlier, sometimes you can be paid mid-month. So for us, that was a big relief, because we knew that if all of a sudden we had to put on extra guys, we were having the funds there at the end of every month to be able to pay and all consumables and things like that. So that was really reassuring. And then he said, we spoke about a few other things and everything. And then he said to me, so when can you start? And I thought he was joking at first, and I just laughingly said tomorrow. and he said, all right, we'll see you then. And then he sort of walked out and shook my hand, walked out. And then the other two guys went out. And then sure enough, the next day, Paul, one of the guys from HY, rang up and said, yeah, you've won the contract, we're sending it through now. So it was an email for it, sorry. They'd sent that through, and Veronica had got it, and she rang me and said, you won't believe it, but we've got the job. Yeah.
You got it.
Yeah, so you're like, I can't believe I got it, and then the panic sets in, like, oh, we got it. So then, the reality of it all, and to get in there and do it, and just the amount of paperwork that's involved, and the amount of people on site when you actually get there, and then you walk through. It's very different to look at something on paper and then to walk through and see, oh, we're doing all of this. And at the same time as doing that, I still had a lot of residential work that we had to do, because obviously doing all of that, that's our bread and butter, all the residential work. So I need to keep all of the builders that I work with happy to get all that other work done. So
there you had the big fish, if you like.
Yeah.
You've got the big fish, you're trying to work in, get that job. But you've also got these smaller fish, the bread and butter, the guys that you work for all year round, as opposed to a one-off major project that's come to town.
Yep.
But what a great story where you have that bigger company and there's a project manager or construction manager in that organisation who is able to help you and almost hold your hand to be able to get the job.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And I think one thing you're forgetting that's so important is that's your personality that came out in that conversation. So he obviously thought you were genuine, wanted to help and sort of get you in, you know, your foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely did that. And I think, again, almost going back to that previous university job at the Callaghan campus in there, we had a leading hand in there who was really good that way as well. He would sort of guide you through the ins and outs of the building company's contract, and he would say, you know, even things like when you put an invoice in, word it this way so that, you know, things they don't question it type thing. And at the end of that job, you know, he said, look, if you're ever looking for a reference or anything like that, then make sure you put my name down. And it was the same, you know, at the university in there. When you first go in there, it's all very daunting and you're meeting, you know, leading hands and things like that. But at the end of it, when you're all done, it's almost, it's not family, you know, that type of cliche thing, but you definitely, there's a sense of relief and, well, we got this done. And it's not just yourself, but it's everyone in there.
The team environment.
Yeah. And I think you really need to foster that feeling with all the leading hands, because, you know, you're dealing with them so often. If you're butting heads with those guys, it doesn't make it very pleasant to be in there. Whereas if you get along with them, they're always going to help you out a lot more than, if you're butting heads with them, that's for sure. If you need that would be the thing. If you might get up to a certain stage and then you go away from the project for a little while, but when that phone rings and they're saying we're ready to go, it's not where you turn around and say, okay, yeah, we'll be there in a week and a half. But no, your contract says you come when we say, and so you got to go. And then, you know, that was the thing, having the employees in there to be able to do that, the guys, just, and then you're dealing with, especially on the second stage when we got in there, you're dealing with finished products, like finishing up against carpet, glass and steel and those kinds of things, making sure there's no damage done, those kinds of things. And making sure that, I think this was, I guess, another sort of, I don't want to talk ourselves up, but when we done that project, Barney Collins, who's the head of the EJE architecture, so they worked on that with Lyons Architecture from Melbourne, so they were the main designers for it. When they'd done their walk around for everything, the final sign off and everything like that, it was just ourselves and Stuart Pinkerton, who was a joiner in there, were the only companies that didn't have any defects put against our name. So for something like that, that was a really, really good feeling to hear that and to know. I mean, for starters, not having to go back and fix anything, that's always great. But yeah, just to hear that from someone like that, like Barney Collins is held fairly in high esteem around Newcastle. EJE Architect, you know, they do so much around town, so you get to build that confidence in that team as well. So they know that, okay, well, if we're putting out a tender for this, these guys are tendered for it. They've done that work in at the university. We know they do good work. Maybe that's a foot in the door. So that was nice.
Oh, certainly. And I think that's what, for people who aren't in the industry, the building construction industry, you might have a roofer or a tiler come along and prepare a price for a particular project. They may not be working on that job for 6-9 months down the track. So you never know how you act or how you engage with someone, how beneficial it is down the track when they may be looking for someone to be a part of their project or somebody else's project. So I think word of mouth and your quality of work still speaks volumes. Even after we're in 2020 and we have social media and everything else, there's still word of mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. Newcastle is 2 degrees of separation. You can go to Sydney and go from one suburb to the next and no one will have heard of anything that you've done, and that's for good or for bad. But in Newcastle, it's it's not a small place, but the circles of people are small, and that makes sense that it doesn't take too long for word to get around about someone who's done good or bad around town. So yeah, it definitely keeps you on your toes in that type of thing.
Absolutely. Now, looking at this project, it's absolutely massive.
I want to say close to 1,000 square metres. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look through it out, but it's on, like I say, it's on every level bar the ground floor, and just they weren't open big square areas. If you actually have ever been there, a lot of the floors wrap around, so you walk out of the lift well, and then they'll wrap around into certain areas, and like I said, you're finishing up against certain things, and every level, the shape that you did was different. So you had to make sure that when you were going through and doing it, that you covered enough, that you were coming, for example, one area might be 1.5 metres off the wall, but you go another 20 metres further down the hall or 5 metres down the hall, and then all of a sudden you're out to 3.7. And if you don't make sure that you've taken that out gradually, then when you get towards the end of the job and they've put their carpet tiles over and it doesn't match up to where they've meant to do it, then you have to go back and look at the plan and say, well, hang on, you guys didn't come out far enough. You got to drag all your heavy machinery back in to do 5 square metres worth of work. So it was just, making sure that, double checking, triple checking, making sure that it was in there. And there would be times where you have to go in there and work quite late at night to get things done, to make sure that you were getting those areas done before the carpet tiles were going down, or making sure before any waterproofing or tiling or anything was getting done. So it was just, we had plans on site, making sure that those plans were current, and making sure that that communication was there with everyone involved to know that you'd done exactly the right thing. And it did come up once where they said, oh, you guys haven't done this area, you need to get in there and do that. And I said, well, no, that's not on the plan, that's not ours. And they said, did you get the newer ones? And I said, well, that was not part of the original price, so we can go in there and do that. The original contract for it was all carpet tiles. And then they went back, looked at it all, and I think they had to look at the budgets and things like that, and said, oh, no, that's right, yeah, you're right, it's carpet tiles in there. So we could have come in and done all that, and I guess not like they're trying to hoodwink you to get you to do it, but they would...
I think on a project that size, there's so many revisions and things going on all the time, so
absolutely
it does happen.
And then we ended up doing... So what happened was, when they poured the concrete in there for that, they put a curing agent over the concrete. So when they were laying carpet tiles down, they couldn't guarantee that the glue would stick because of that. So we ended up grinding the majority of the university, it was preparation grind, so that the floor was scuffed up enough so their glue would be able to stick. So when we say, we ground that whole university, we did. It's just...
You really did.
Yeah, it's just some areas you obviously, the decorative side of it, and some of it was just for that functionality. And that was, again, they would put a tender out for that, but because we had our machines already in there, it was just easier for us to be able to do it. So as long as we kept the price sort of fairly conservative, then they were happy to go with us. And because we already knew what we were doing in there with the work, and they knew our work, they were happy to just get it done.
So on that job, did that project manager or that construction manager, did he do like a reference check on you, or did he ask to see some of your work?
No, he didn't ask to see him, because the day that we met him, he'd only flown in for the day from Townsville, and he was going back that same day. So whether he'd met anyone else from who'd done polishing as well, I'm not too sure. He definitely didn't ask for any references, but that's not to say he didn't speak to the architects who'd done some background checks. I'm not too sure. But it was generally just, from what I could tell, it was just that meeting that we had with him.
That physical presence and contact, good old eye contact.
Having
a discussion in person.
Yeah, and that, I think that's what nowadays it gets lost a lot. Just I hate sending text messages and emails and things like that, because the way sometimes that can be construed is just, you can't pick up from the inflection through a voice or looking someone in the face, and that's what it was. It was just I remember the day we met him. It was flogging down rain, and they come inside the showroom and everything like that. It was a winter's day, and he was saying how, why would he want to be down here on a day like that when he lives in Townsville, type of thing. So it was just a really nice way to meet, and like I say, someone who's so high up within the business to come and meet a little one-man band, and the next day, we find out we got the job. So it was a really, really good way to do it. And I guess I hadn't thought about that job for such a long time until we start talking about it now. But you start to look back with those really fond memories.
I think it's about relationships as well, having that relationship. You can't beat it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yep.
So what was your favourite part of that job?
When it was done. It was, it was it was fun to go in there every day. The crew of guys that we had working, everyone got along really well. Knew it was hard work, but everybody who was in there seemed to get along with a lot of the other trades in there, the painters and the gyprockers and stuff. Everyone got along fairly well. A lot of times you can walk on site and you feel tension because everyone's just, this is my area, you keep out type thing. But for us, it wasn't like that. We knew, got to know quite a few of the guys in there and the foreman and things like that. And I think that can be a part of it as well, as the guys who are the leading hands and things like that. However, there was a guy in there, Mick, his name was, and he was just such a laid-back guy. And if you did everything right by him, he'd do everything right by you. And that just seemed to be how everybody worked in there, that, you help me and I'll help you type thing. And, okay, I need to grind that section of the floor over there, but you're painting there. If I go away for an hour or so and do it over there, when I come back, then I can get into that. Is that all right? Yeah, we'll have it done in half an hour and you'll be right. And that's again, communication. But, yeah, definitely the finishing, when it was all done, there was that relief involved of it all because, like you say, it started off as a little one-man band. And even just when we first started out, I was doing another job and I had just one guy in there and I just needed somebody. There wasn't even anything that we needed to do. They just wanted someone in there to, I guess, be progressing slightly. So I had a lot of meetings with them and said where we need to be type thing. And so I had just one guy in there with just a small machine every day going along basically up against where they would have a wall, just so that when they put the wall in, that part would all be ground. And so
that was to minimise disruptions and damage as well.
And damage, that's right, yeah. So we had the outline of where, so the aluminium or the frames of the walls were already up. They just wanted us to get in and grind up against those before they put the skirting and the gyprock on there. So, yeah, I had one guy in there just doing that and making sure that they were happy to see some progression, and that's what it was. And then, but once they said, okay, now we need you in here, then, you got your tail in there and you had everyone in there working and getting things done, even to the point where there was a lot of damage to the floor where they had to install the scaffold and things like that. So it'd be shot into the floor, bolted into the floor, but that was part of the floor that was actually part of the polished concrete. So when they pulled all that out, and obviously just normal wear and tear of the floor, there were a lot of chips and holes in the floor. So then they engaged us to go around and patch all the holes in the floor. And so I had to put a guy on just to do that. So just somebody to go in there and essentially find every single decent hole in that floor. And the same thing, reading the plans to make sure it was still part of it, and go around filling those holes with epoxy and making sure that lined up with he would be ahead of our machine. So when we come through and grind it, we could grind it all flat. And then having the progress of, because we couldn't go through and seal every floor at once because it would make the whole university shut down. So we had to work out the coating system was you put a coat on one day, let it cure, and then second coat the next day. So that would essentially make that level be off-site. You'd have to be off that floor for 2 days. So we had to coordinate all of that, get the guys in to roll it all and make sure that that was okay. And we'd have the site meeting every morning, making sure that everyone knew, but you still had someone who would walk across it. And by that stage, they had cameras on, so that they caught a few people and, no, it wasn't me. They'd show them the video. Oh, yeah, that one, yeah. But even things, we were pretty lucky. You know, you always hear about things, you know, being stolen and knocked off on sites like that. I think we lost, the whole time we were in there, we lost one angle grinder, and that was it. So, you know, it was a good site for that as well. But it was just a good all-round job, and to be involved with it. And I think that, for myself, my personal opinion, I think it's probably one of the nicest buildings in Newcastle. And to be involved, it's very progressive, that's for sure. And to be involved with that, to say that we're involved with that, that's something that I'll always be proud of.
I think it's a great building, and particularly obviously it's probably one of the most busiest buildings in Newcastle with all the students. And as I said, I was very lucky to be one of the first students going there. So what is the best advice that you would have for somebody working for themselves in the construction industry, thinking about taking that leap that you did, going after that bigger job?
Stubbornness. I mean, obviously get all of as much information on anything that you're going to be able to, but just commit to it and be stubborn and say, okay, well, that's what I want to do.
Rise above the doubts that you have, the self-doubt.
Yeah, because we're all filled with doubt. I remember I heard a saying once, you know, everyone has demons. You'll always have them, but you got to be stronger than them. So you've got to rise above all of that and just push yourself through. If you didn't, then you can always make money doing something. But I think even dollars-wise, it's not so much when you look at the end of the day how much is in your bank account. You can look back and say, yeah, I was involved in that, or I was involved in that. And who would have thought that we'd ever be able to get to that stage and be able to do something like that? If you beat your own doubt, then there's nothing better than that, I think. Or
even your children, you know, in years' time saying, my dad did this.
Yeah, to be involved in something like that. Like, I can only imagine if my kids go to university, you know, and they go into that campus there. I mean, by the time they get in there, they may have covered the floor with carpet or something, I don't know. But to say that, yeah, you had a hand in that, to be involved in an iconic building of something like that. And the university, you know, a place of learning where people go to better themselves. You know, it's great to be involved in that kind of thing. As you know, we still, like I said before, the bread and butter is people's homes and residential, but really do enjoy doing things like that as well. You know, some of the restaurants and cafes that we've been involved in throughout Newcastle as well, they're always really good to do. Public places, I think, are always fun.
Speaking of the future, what are your goals for the future?
I definitely, like I mentioned before, I want to get a little coffee cart going. I love the aspect of coffee that it makes people sit down and talk. Whenever I would drive to work when I was younger, there was a little coffee shop, and this was before coffee shops are anywhere near as big as they are now. And there'd always be these three old guys who were sitting at the front of this coffee shop talking every single morning. And I just loved how they did that. And I always thought to myself, when I get to that age, I want to do that. And I think, you know, at that time of the morning, coffee's the only socially acceptable thing that you can sit around and drink and just talk and be open with people. And I think that there's probably not quite so much of that nowadays, like we spoke about earlier with social media and telephones and things like that. We're so consumed by all of that thing. It's good to see when you see people talking, and I think, coffee's good for that. So I don't want to own so much a coffee shop, but I'd like to put a little coffee cart out the front, and like I said, more into the future of making concrete furniture and things like that. So I get, like you said, that creative side is allowed to run free. We did a job for a guy once up in Cessnock who was a sculptor, and he had these sculptures going to hotels all over the world, and he was just doing it all from a little, you wouldn't even call it a studio, from the backyard, and he could walk down the street and no one would know who he was, and yet he's getting paid thousands and thousands of dollars to make these things. And it's just, again, it's not the money or anything like that, but it's the lifestyle that he was so happy. You know, his partner would be driving around in this old beat up ute, and they would go and collect stuff and do all that, and it was just, I would like to get to that stage where I'm not driven by the dollars. Even now, it's not all about making X amount of money, but I tell you what, when you know that all your bills are paid and the lights are on and you've got food on the table, things are a hell of a lot easier than when you're relying on paying for nappies with a petrol card. So for the future, that's for me. I want to get to that stage. I can be involved I want to get to that stage where I'm so involved in my kids' life that I annoy them. That's, that would be really good. And if it's not my kids, then my grandchildren, especially, I really, to the point where my kids tell me, look, just butt out, these are our kids, you raised us and now it's our turn, so that's exciting.
That's satisfaction too. That's about being truly happy and satisfied and getting up every day, looking back at all those years, even though they probably didn't seem like it at the time, but they were the golden years when all you and Veronica had were hopes and dreams. And it just comes back to basics and being happy and seeing your kids grow up. And if your kids can learn one thing from you, you want them to learn to work hard and be ethical in everything that they do. And as a parent, it's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's when I hear people say, I can't wait till I retire. I never want to retire. To the day they put me in the grave, I'll be working because I just like it. It's people say, oh, you become a slave to your work or things like that. But I think if you enjoy what you're doing, and it's such a cliche, you never work a day in your life type of thing. Because when you do enjoy it, you're still working, and it's still very, very hard to do. But you enjoy that, and that's why, like I say, I'll always work to the even if it's going around to kids' house and building a chook pen or something like that. You hear that, don't you? Where people, they retire and within 12 months they just health crash. Or
it's so true, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a society trap where they say, okay, we'll give you. You give us till you're 65 and then you can enjoy the best years of your life and do nothing. After that, you get the golden watch and off you go into the sunset. But that's when people don't enjoy their lives because all of a sudden they have no purpose to get up in the morning. So, no, I don't know what I'll be doing, but I'll be working till the day that I die.
Look, I can see you being just like that Melbourne mentor that you were talking about, the family. Someone that anyone in the industry can go to for advice. So, look, this has been truly remarkable. So, Matt, if people listening to this want to get into contact with you or Veronica, what's the best way to go about it?
We can find us on Instagram through Crete Kings Without Crowns, or your probably best phone number-wise would be to call Veronica on 0409 005 994.
It's hard to remember these days.
Yeah,
sometimes,
it is.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
sometimes I have to look on the back of my own shirt to remember.
All right, Matt, this has been truly remarkable. You're such a creative guy. It's been truly inspiring listening to this. Really appreciate you giving up your time and coming on the show. So thank you.
I appreciate you for doing this and getting it out there. It's great. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Matt. Well, that was Matt from Crete Kings Without Crowns. I hope you found that episode as inspiring as I did. I absolutely loved how one of his favourite pieces of work to date was one off the back of good old-fashioned reaching out to people looking for an opportunity. You never know when talking to someone or reaching out to someone may open the doors to big opportunities several years down the track. As always, I encourage you to see some of Matt and Veronica's work, which is linked via our Instagram page. I'm sure this episode will inspire a lot of people. As mentioned earlier, we have some great partners who are wanting to jump on board with Build Hatch so we can get these stories out there. Stay tuned for some exciting announcements to be made shortly, and please do rate our show. Thank you.
You have experienced a Build Hatch developed production.